Fred, the manager, wasn't happy about having to hire Julia, his boss's stepdaughter. She had a limp, so he figured dishwashing was the only job she could handle. He watched the security cameras one night, expecting to see Julia struggling. Instead, he saw something that made him stop cold. The once ordinary restaurant was bustling with excitement. It belonged to Greg, a kind old man who everyone loved. He was about to marry Marie, a charming woman with a daughter, Julia. Julia loved to cook just like her stepfather, but she had a disability that made walking difficult. People often judged her without giving her a chance. Julia wouldn't let her disability stop her dreams. She kept searching for an internship in a restaurant, but no one would hire her. They thought she wouldn't be fast enough in the kitchen. Julia was determined to prove them wrong. Greg knew how talented she was and wanted to help. Julia was in her third year of culinary school and needed an internship to graduate. So, Greg convinced Fred to give her a chance. Fred wasn't convinced. He figured dishwashing was the only job Julia could do. But when he watched the security cameras one night, his gut twisted. He saw Julia talking to some of the other cooks. They didn't seem friendly. In fact, they looked angry. Fred watched closer, his heart pounding. What was Julia saying to them? Why did they look so mad? The tension crackled through the screen. Julia stood calmly, her back to the camera, facing the cooks. Their faces were obscured by the steam rising from a pot, but their hostile body language was clear. Fred leaned closer, straining to hear any snippet of conversation. Silence. The camera only picked up the hiss of the stove and the clatter of metal utensils. Suddenly, one of the cooks shoved a stack of dirty plates into Julia's arms. They wobbled precariously, threatening to topple over. Julia, caught off guard, stumbled back a step, her face contorting in pain. Fred's breath caught in his throat. Had she hurt herself? But Julia, with remarkable agility considering his initial assumptions, righted herself and steadied the plates. A flicker of defiance crossed her features before she turned back to the cooks, her mouth set in a firm line. Frustrated, Fred slammed his fist on the desk. What was going on? Why were they treating her like that? Shame washed over him. He'd relegated Julia to the least important job without a second thought. Now, he was witnessing a situation he didn't understand, a situation that made his gut churn with a mix of concern and anger. He grabbed his phone, his finger hovering over the security camera app. He needed a closer look. Needed to know what was happening before things escalated. But before he could press the button, a new notification popped up on his screen. It was from the restaurant's main reservation system. His eyes widened in horror. Massive online order placed, the notification blared. Delivery requested in 30 minutes. All hands on deck. Fred swore under his breath. A massive online order, one that would take all their combined efforts to fulfill in 30 minutes, landed right in the middle of this brewing conflict. Panic gnawed at him. He couldn't leave Julia alone with those hostile cooks, but abandoning his post during a rush like this could be disastrous. He glanced back at the screen, the image frozen on Julia's defiant expression. Taking a deep breath, he made a decision. He grabbed his walkie-talkie, voice tight with urgency. Everyone! Drop what you're doing, we have a monster order to fill. Chef, I need you on the grill, Sarah, double time on prep. And Julia. He hesitated, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest. Julia, you think you can handle plating on the fly? Silence. Then, a faint crackle on the walkie-talkie, followed by Julia's clear, unwavering voice. Let's do this. Fred felt a sliver of doubt melt away. He didn't know what had transpired between Julia and the cooks, but one thing was clear, she wasn't backing down. The kitchen lurched into action, a symphony of sizzling pans, chopping knives, and frantic shouts. Fred watched the camera feed intently, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. Julia moved with surprising speed and efficiency, her movements a blur of precision as she juggled plates, garnished dishes, and navigated the bustling kitchen with surprising agility. The hostility from the cook seemed to have evaporated, replaced by a grudging respect as they worked in a tense, silent cooperation. As the final seconds ticked down, Fred watched with bated breath as the last plate was boxed and sealed. They had done it. Relief washed over him, so potent it almost obscured the lingering questions. What had happened with Julia and the cooks? What was the cause of their initial antagonism? The answer would have to wait. Right now, he had a delivery driver to brief and a team to debrief. But as he scanned the exhausted but triumphant faces in the kitchen, one thing was undeniable: Julia was no mere dishwasher. She was a force to be reckoned with, a talent waiting to be unleashed. And Fred, for the first time, felt a surge of excitement. Maybe, just maybe, he'd underestimated the potential of both Julia and his own restaurant. The pressure of the massive order subsided, leaving an uneasy calm in its wake. Fred dismissed the team with a tired but grateful nod. Everyone except Julia. He lingered by the dishwashing station, the clatter of clean cutlery a nervous counterpoint to the silence. "Julia," he began, his voice gruff. "About earlier." Julia stopped drying a plate, her gaze meeting his in the reflection of a stainless steel pan. Her eyes, the same warm brown as her stepfather's, held a mixture of defiance and something else, a flicker of fear. "They were testing me," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. Fred's stomach clenched. "Testing you? How?" She hesitated, then set the plate down with a quiet clink. "Newbies always get tested. See if they can handle the heat, both literally and figuratively." A humorless laugh escaped her lips. "Guess I passed." Fred couldn't help but admire her resilience. Yet, a new concern gnawed at him. "Why didn't you say anything? You didn't deserve that treatment." Julia shrugged, a flicker of bitterness crossing her features. "It's kind of a rite of passage, isn't it? Especially for someone like me." Her voice dropped to a near inaudible level. "They wouldn't take me seriously otherwise." Fred felt a wave of shame wash over him. He'd been so quick to judge her based on her disability that he hadn't even considered the additional challenges she faced. "Julia," he said, his voice sincere. "I apologize. I should have trusted you. And from now on, you won't be stuck on dishes. You're on plating duty, permanently." A surprised smile broke across Julia's face, genuine and bright. "Really?" "Really," Fred confirmed, a newfound respect warming his chest. "You earned it." As Julia returned to her work, a newfound determination shone in her eyes. The test was over, but a new chapter was beginning. And in the heart of that bustling kitchen, a silent promise hung in the air, a promise of respect, of opportunity, and perhaps, of a future where Julia wouldn't just be accepted, but celebrated.